what people perceive, what their attitudes and views are. Do you want wind power? Would you rather have it 6 miles, 13, or 20 miles? Well, not surprisingly, people say, well, I'd rather have it 20 miles and further ashore. But when we ask them, would you be willing to pay more if we move this offshore? So now we're getting into economic modeling and asking their economic preferences. Really, by the time you're about 6, 7, 8, 9 miles, people are not willing to pay any more to move it further offshore. They may have a preference, a nominal preference, but they're just not willing to pay any more for that preference. So this was a pretty important finding, and really was novel and is different than the wind energy industry was thinking. They really have said, oh, we need to move them further and further offshore, and our view is that people are willing to accept in-view projects. You can see, so here's just a slight graphic. These are support if the wind farm is out of sight. So here we're trying to find out, well, how important is the visual? You can see in Delaware, opposition goes down really low, and support is still. It was interestingly, if you recall, we only had 38 people who were opposed, who were unsure at 13 miles, but when it's further up, when it's way offside, you get more people who in Delaware who are unsure. Now, it's not statistically different, but a little bit anomalous. But you can see in the Sound, where initially we had majority opposed, 46 to 53, they don't want to see it. If you can get it further offshore, you will get more support, even if you're not willing to pay for it. So take home is that the distance from shore, while important and perhaps critical for some people, is not as important as believed by either policymakers or the wind industry. And we think, in our view, that place attachment is more important than viewshed per se. People are attached to where they live. And people put value into cultural landscapes. And people, we really reject the NIMBY moniker that is put on people who are opposed. We think NIMBY is a description of a result, opposition, but does nothing to really explain the underlying reasons as to why people are opposed. And to us, it really is more attachment to the place where they live. In this regard, we think that semi-enclosed seas, like, although it's technically the Nantucket Sound for legal purposes is an ocean, but people think of it as a semi-enclosed sea, and places like Delaware Bay as well. Semi-enclosed seas are different. People have a greater attachment to these areas than they do to an area that is arguably more pristine, the ocean. And that's something different than on land, where people may have the strongest attachments to places like wilderness and think of those areas as untouchable. But in the ocean, which is vast, we think about these things a little different than those more enclosed areas. So briefly, I just want to tell you about this out-of-state tourist survey. We surveyed in 3 tourist town beaches right on the beach, 2 boardwalks, and 3 state park beaches. We had a very high response rate. People were hanging out on the beach. Some people said, oh no, I'm on my vacation, I don't want the bad vibes of filling out a survey. But for the most part, people looked at it as a nice diversion. Okay, I can spend 20 minutes doing a survey. We walked up and down the beaches. People think that's pretty great and romantic, but it's hot and hard work. But someone had to do it, so we did it. And so people are interested in what the tourist impacts are going to be of these things. And we found that some people, this is at 6 miles, said they would switch beaches, and some people said they would go to a beach completely outside of Delaware, and there's got to be some concern about that. We also asked a similar question to our residents, and you can see, not surprisingly, they're more stable in their beach preferences, but some of them still said they would go to a different beach. And there is a distance component. We showed different simulations, and when you get really close, this is at 1 mile away, you get more tourists who are, I don't think I'm going to want to go to that beach and look at a wind turbine. Now, again, these are stated intentions, and actual intentions may differ. And so, we really won't know some of this stuff until we actually build these farms, but it's really good to have, whenever you do a scientific experiment, it's good to do the before. You're going to want to have some controls, and then you put in a stimulus, and then you want to see the effect. So having these multiple surveys. We asked people if they would go to a beach they didn't normally visit, or one that they were unfamiliar, if it had a wind turbine. And you can see 66% of the people said they were likely to go to a beach to see a wind turbine. So you're going to get some people who say, I want to go to a different beach. And you'll get other people who say, yeah, that would be kind of cool to see what it looked like. And you can imagine if their Uncle Sam is in town from Montana, and they're going to go for the beach. Well, Sam, do you want to go to this beach, or do you want to go to the beach where you can see a wind turbine? Well, let's go to the beach. So you can envision that you might get multiple visits, and we get, again, similar in Delaware, we get, more than 80% who said they would go to an unfamiliar beach. We also asked, well, is there going to be any kind of tourism benefits? And obviously, the closer you put your wind farm, the easier it is to have tourism. If you're 6 miles away, it's easier to take a boat out than it is if it's 13 miles away. And we got, 45% of the people who said they were likely to take a boat tour. So we don't know whether the impacts are overall going to be negative or positive. There's some reason to think that they might be positive, but they're probably going to be generally about a wash. It doesn't seem to be an item of large concern. So it's important when we need to think about these things as effects rather than impacts. Impacts sort of has a negative connotation, and there are going to be some positive effects and some negative effects. So my end, I just want to say, I like to try and think globally, but we need to act locally, and I was very involved, and part of the reason they have me out here is in some small groups discussions, and I'll be happy to talk about this when I'm done with my formal remarks about participation in a bidding process that led to this contract with Blue Water Wind and Delmarva Power. I also participated in a rulemaking proceeding leading to a requirement that these external health costs and other environmental costs be included on a life cycle basis in long-term energy planning. So I guess my other advice for at a university, we have obligations as professors to our students. We have obligations to the academy, but I think we, in a certain sense, we're also public servants, and we have an obligation to go out into the world and use our skills and knowledge to help the public understand things and to help the decision makers make educated decisions. So again, we formed a research partnership with Gamesa. That's the manufacturer of our wind turbine, and we put up this 2 megawatt wind turbine, and we're generating electricity for our campus, plus we're engaging in research, and we use it as an education tool as well. So you try and figure out ways to benefit all these things. We also signed a creative cooperative research and development agreement with the National Renewable Energy Lab based in Boulder to help us as we're working now in Delaware to build an offshore wind turbine testing site where manufacturers can come and test their turbines in an ocean environment. We think that's going to help to build the industry in the Mid-Atlantic and in the United States, and help bring down the cost and make offshore wind more cost competitive. Again, this is just some research of my colleague. We got a very large resource here along the Atlantic coast. You've got large resource here. Indeed, it's enough energy to meet all of the energy needs of the region. When you're looking at all solutions are local, you need to look for things that are an energy that are large. For us, the offshore wind resource worldwide is much bigger than the wave resource or the tidal current resource. The other large resource in the U.S. along the Atlantic is the Gulf Stream. These are large untapped resources. Obviously, other parts of the country, like here and in the Southwest, you've got a lot of possibilities for solar and concentrated solar, and we need to think about these things locally. We do have a number of projects now going on the East Coast, which should help things. And the other thing, you may have heard, because Google got involved, about this offshore transmission backbone. Interestingly, a couple of year before, so we put in a joint proposal with Transelect, who's the company that's really behind this backbone, to DOE to do some studies of exactly where to place it and to do some public outreach. We didn't get funded. They only funded a bunch of land transmission. This was a great development. And my colleague has done some work on what are the benefits of transmission, and he looked at these buoys all up and down the East Coast. And you can see in the red and the blue, these are individual buoys, and you can see at times that they're producing zero output because the wind's not blowing, but if you can hook these all up, you get some base load effects, you smooth out the curve, and so there's a lot of advantages if you can do some offshore transmission. And I guess I just leave you with a picture of offshore wind in Hawaii. Given that your continental shelf drops off quickly, you're probably going to have to, likely to go with floating wind turbines. Fortunately, there's efforts underway in Norway where they've put a prototype in 120 meters depth, and there's now efforts in Maine looking at through the depths of 60 to 100 meters. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone have, and thank you very much for your patience and good listening skills. Yeah.
Question. Have you asked any questions on perception of change in national security status, safety on a grand scale, whether it's from tourism, terrorism, or in terms of having energy independence from the national security point of view?
We haven't, and there are a bunch of questions you'd like to ask. As it is, our surveys are, I think, relatively long, and so it's difficult. But I would agree it would be good to understand, and now that we've seen energy independence resonate so much, in our next survey, we may then try to follow that up to try to understand better. Why exactly is that? Is it people don't like dealing with the fluctuation in price? Is it because they're scared of terrorism, or they just want independence from other countries? And that's something that we might follow up with in the next survey. Yes?
I'm really curious about the difference between the Cape Cod response and the Delaware response, and you've kind of talked about it around the edges. I mean, it's clear that there's some geographic differences in the two sites, and maybe there's cultural or historical differences